In March 2025, construction workers drilling foundation holes for a new shopping complex in Warsaw, Poland, struck something unusual 22 feet below street level. The drill bit hit reinforced concrete where city planning maps showed only clay soil. When engineers investigated on March 12th, they found a sealed bunker entrance, concrete walls 3 feet thick, a steel door with German military specifications stamped 1944, and behind that door, a tunnel system extending 400 feet underground toward the Vistula River. Inside the main chamber, Polish authorities discovered a command center, wooden desks preserved by the dry underground environment, filing cabinets containing German military documents, and most significantly, a leather satchel containing identity papers, personal letters, and a hand-drawn escape route map marked in red ink. The identity papers belonged to Generalleutnant Friedrich Wilhelm von Steinberg, commander of the 347th Infantry Division, last seen in Berlin on April 28, 1945, 2 days before Hitler's suicide. Allied records from 1945 list von Steinberg as killed in action during the Battle of Berlin. Soviet casualty reports claim his body was identified among German officers killed defending the Reichstag. The West German government declared him legally dead in 1956. His name appears on a memorial in Munich honoring fallen Wehrmacht generals. Except the documents in Warsaw were dated May 15, 1945, 2 weeks after Berlin fell, written in von Steinberg's handwriting, and described a functioning escape network that moved high-ranking German officers through Eastern Europe long after the war ended. That tunnel led to a facility proving German generals didn't all die in Berlin or surrender to Allied forces. Some built elaborate escape routes and disappeared into networks that kept them hidden for decades. If you want to see what investigators found in those Warsaw tunnels, and how von Steinberg orchestrated one of World War II's most sophisticated escapes, hit the like button and subscribe, because the evidence recovered from that bunker rewrites everything historians thought they knew about the fate of Germany's military leadership in 1945. Now back to Berlin, April 1945, where von Steinberg was supposedly preparing to die defending the Reich. The official record says he fell fighting Soviet troops. The Warsaw bunker tells a completely different story. Friedrich Wilhelm von Steinberg was born in Prussia in 1893 to an aristocratic military family. His father served as a colonel in the Imperial German Army during World War. A young Friedrich attended the Prussian Military Academy, graduated in 1913, and saw combat as a junior officer during the Great War. He survived the trenches, earned the Iron Cross First Class, and remained in the drastically reduced Reichswehr after Germany's defeat in 1918. Unlike many Prussian officers who joined the Nazi Party enthusiastically, von Steinberg's relationship with the regime was pragmatic. His personnel file, declassified by German archives in 2003, shows he joined the NSDAP in 1937, relatively late for a career officer, and his membership appeared motivated by professional necessity rather than ideological conviction. He rose through Wehrmacht ranks based on competence, commanding battalion and regimental levels during the Polish and French campaigns. By 1942, von Steinberg commanded the 347th Infantry Division on the Eastern Front. His division saw heavy combat during the battles for Stalingrad and Kursk, suffering massive casualties but maintaining discipline under horrific conditions. Soviet intelligence files from the era, declassified in 1997, describe von Steinberg as a capable defensive commander who avoided the reckless offensive operations that destroyed many Wehrmacht divisions. What made von Steinberg unusual among German generals wasn't his combat record, which was competent but unremarkable, but his administrative background. Before receiving frontline commands, he'd served 3 years in the Wehrmacht's logistics directorate, managing supply networks across occupied Europe. He understood how military supply systems functioned, how resources moved through conquered territories, and most critically, how to exploit bureaucratic networks for unofficial purposes. Skills that would prove invaluable when he decided not to die in Berlin. By January 1945, von Steinberg's 347th Division was shattered. Months of Soviet offensives had reduced it from 15,000 men to barely 3,000 combat-effective soldiers. Hitler ordered the remnants to Berlin for the final defense. Von Steinberg arrived in the capital in March 1945 with what remained of his command. He was assigned to defensive positions in the Tempelhof district, expected to delay Soviet advances for as long as possible before inevitable death or capture. The strategic situation in Berlin by April 1945 was apocalyptic. The Soviet armies surrounded the city. Allied bombing had reduced much of Berlin to rubble. German command structure was collapsing. Hitler raged in his Führerbunker, issuing impossible orders to non-existent armies. Most rational Wehrmacht officers recognized the war was lost, but Nazi ideology and fear of Soviet vengeance kept them fighting. Von Steinberg's family situation added personal urgency. His wife Anna had died during an Allied bombing raid on Dresden in February 1945. His two sons, both Wehrmacht officers, had been killed on the Eastern Front, one at Stalingrad in 1943, the other during the retreat from Kursk in 1944. His daughter Margaret lived in Bavaria with her husband, a Luftwaffe pilot missing in action since 1944. Von Steinberg had little reason to die for a regime that had consumed his family. Unlike younger officers indoctrinated by Nazi ideology, von Steinberg belonged to the old Prussian military tradition. He'd sworn an oath to Germany, not to Hitler personally. By April 1945, he considered that oath fulfilled. What he owed now was survival, and he'd been planning it since January. Soviet forces entered Berlin on April 21, 1945. The battle was street-by-street carnage. Von Steinberg's position in Tempelhof came under sustained assault on April 23. According to Soviet combat records, the 347th Infantry Division remnants resisted for 3 days before being overrun on April 26. Soviet reports listed Generalleutnant von Steinberg among the German officers killed during the fighting. Western Allied intelligence, receiving information from Soviet sources, confirmed his death in reports dated May 1945. The British War Office file on von Steinberg, declassified in 1985, states, Generalleutnant Friedrich von Steinberg, commanding 347th Infantry Division, killed in action Berlin, April 26-28, 1945. Body identified by Soviet forces among German casualties in Tempelhof sector. But von Steinberg's daughter Margaret received a letter in July 1945, postmarked from Switzerland, unsigned but written in her father's handwriting. The letter, donated to a German historical society in 1993, contained only 2 sentences. "The storm has passed. I watch from distant hills." She kept the letter secret for nearly 50 years, telling investigators in 1994 that she feared Soviet or Allied prosecution if she revealed her father had survived. The mystery deepened in 1991 when Soviet archives began opening after the USSR's collapse. A researcher discovered a Red Army intelligence report from June 1945 that questioned von Steinberg's death. The report noted that, while a German general's body was found in Tempelhof wearing von Steinberg's insignia, dental records didn't match photographs of von Steinberg from earlier in the war. The examining Soviet officer suspected the body might be a double, but the report was filed away and ignored in the chaos of 1945. Western historians occasionally noted these inconsistencies, but assumed they reflected wartime confusion. Body identification in Berlin's rubble was notoriously unreliable. Thousands of German officers died in the battle, and Soviet forces weren't particularly careful about documentation. The case remained closed for 80 years because nobody connected scattered evidence across multiple countries and archives, until construction workers in Warsaw broke through concrete and found a bunker that shouldn't exist. What Polish investigators found inside that underground complex would prove von Steinberg not only survived Berlin, but orchestrated an escape network that moved dozens of German officers through Eastern Europe and lived under a false identity for decades after the war supposedly ended. The Warsaw bunker wasn't just a hiding place. It was a way station in an underground railroad that von Steinberg built using his logistics expertise, starting in January 1945, when he realized Berlin's fall was inevitable. April 25, 1945, 1900 hours. Von Steinberg's command post in Tempelhof district is under sustained Soviet artillery bombardment. His aide, Major Klaus Hoffmann, reports Soviet infantry advancing from 3 directions. The 347th Division's remnants, approximately 400 men, are surrounded. Conventional military doctrine offers 2 options: fight to the death or surrender. Von Steinberg chooses neither. At 2100 hours, he assembles his senior officers, 8 men, and presents a third option. He's been planning an escape route for 3 months, using his logistical expertise to establish safe houses, forge documents, and supply caches across Eastern Europe. The route leads through Warsaw, Krakow, Vienna, and eventually to Switzerland. Several officers volunteer immediately. Others choose to remain and fight. Von Steinberg respects both decisions. At 200 hours on April 26th, while Soviet forces concentrate on the main German defensive line, von Steinberg and 12 officers, including Major Hoffmann, escape through Berlin's sewer system. They've prepared for this, carrying civilian clothes, forged identity papers, and emergency rations. More critically, they carry knowledge of the escape route's waypoints, coordinates, contacts, and recognition codes. The sewers beneath Tempelhof connect to a network extending across Berlin. Von Steinberg's group navigates using maps he'd obtained months earlier from city utility workers. They travel underground for 6 hours, moving east toward Berlin's outskirts, away from the main Soviet assault routes. At 800 hours, they emerge from a sewer grating in Köpenick district, on Berlin's eastern edge. Here, the plan hits its first critical phase. Von Steinberg's logistics background proves essential. During his time managing Wehrmacht supply networks, he'd cultivated relationships with German civilians who operated black market networks supplying troops. These networks, motivated by profit rather than ideology, had no loyalty to the collapsing Nazi regime. They'd agreed, for payment in gold and valuables, to help move people eastward. The group splits into pairs to avoid detection. Von Steinberg, traveling with Major Hoffmann, meets their contact at a bombed-out factory at 1000 hours. The contact, a former Wehrmacht quartermaster named Georg Müller, provides a truck registered to a Polish labor contractor, forged papers identifying von Steinberg and Hoffmann as Polish workers being repatriated, and directions to the first waypoint outside Berlin. This is where von Steinberg's plan showed genius. Instead of fleeing west toward American lines, where thousands of German soldiers were surrendering, he moved east into Soviet-occupied territory. Counterintuitive but brilliant, Soviet forces advancing westward were focused on combat operations, not checking civilian movements eastward. Polish and Czech workers were being displaced in massive numbers. A few more traveling east wouldn't attract attention. April 27th through May 10th. Von Steinberg's group, now traveling in 4 separate pairs to minimize risk, moves through Soviet-occupied territory toward Warsaw. The journey is dangerous. Soviet patrols, roaming military police units, desperate German deserters, and civilians seeking revenge against anyone in German uniform create constant threats. But von Steinberg had prepared. At each waypoint, approximately 30-40 miles apart, contacts provide shelter, food, updated intelligence on Soviet patrol patterns, and documentation for the next leg. These contacts are diverse: black marketeers, ethnic Germans sympathetic to refugees, anti-Soviet Polish partisans willing to help anyone the Soviets might want captured, and even a Soviet supply sergeant bribed months earlier with looted artwork. The group's cover story evolves at each stage. Initially, they're Polish workers returning home. Later, they pose as Czech refugees displaced by the war. By the time they reach Warsaw in early May, they're documented as Belgian forced laborers trying to reach Allied lines in the West. The constantly changing stories make them harder to trace. May 15, 1945. Von Steinberg and Major Hoffman arrive in Warsaw. The city is devastated, worse than Berlin. The 1944 Warsaw Uprising and subsequent German reprisals leveled entire districts. Soviet occupation authorities are establishing control, but chaos persists. Von Steinberg has one critical task in Warsaw: securing the bunker. He'd identified the location in January 1945 from Wehrmacht construction records. During Germany's occupation of Poland, military engineers built numerous underground facilities. Most were documented and seized by Soviet forces, but von Steinberg found references to a bunker constructed in 1944 by a Wehrmacht engineer unit that was destroyed shortly afterward. The bunker's location was recorded in files von Steinberg had access to, but he suspected Soviet authorities hadn't found it yet. Using contacts from his escape network, von Steinberg locates the bunker entrance beneath a collapsed building. The structure is intact, sealed, and exactly as Wehrmacht records described: 3 reinforced chambers, a tunnel leading toward the Vistula River, an emergency escape route, and storage areas. It's perfect for what von Steinberg needs: a way station where escaping German officers can rest, reorganize, and receive updated documentation before continuing west. Von Steinberg spends 3 days in Warsaw, May 15th to 18th, establishing the bunker as a functioning safe house. He leaves supplies, forged documents, and instructions hidden in the filing cabinets. He also leaves something else: a leather satchel containing his personal papers, identity documents, and letters. Years later, investigators would debate why. Possibly sentiment, keeping a record of his true identity before assuming false ones permanently. Possibly insurance, documentation proving his service if circumstances changed, and he needed to reclaim his identity. The escape route map found in the satchel, drawn in red ink on Wehrmacht stationery, shows the full network. Warsaw to Krakow, 4 waypoints. Krakow to Vienna, 6 waypoints. Vienna to Switzerland, 3 waypoints, each marked with coordinates and coded identifiers for contacts. The map represents months of careful planning, exploitation of supply networks, and bribes paid in gold, artwork, and valuables von Steinberg had accumulated during his service. May 19th. Von Steinberg leaves Warsaw, continuing toward Krakow. Behind him, the bunker remains operational. Over the following months, approximately 20 to 30 German officers used the facility while escaping west. The exact number is unclear, but forensic evidence found in 2025 suggests multiple groups passed through. The rest of von Steinberg's journey, pieced together from scattered evidence, took him through Krakow by late May 1945, through Vienna by June, and into Switzerland by July. Once in Switzerland, a neutral nation that sheltered numerous refugees and maintained banking secrecy, von Steinberg disappeared into an identity that investigators haven't fully traced 80 years later. But what investigators found in that Warsaw bunker, beyond the satchel and maps, would prove the escape route wasn't just von Steinberg's personal survival plan. It was a network that kept operating for months after the war, moving German officers, Nazi officials, and SS personnel across Europe, and connected to other escape routes running through Italy, Spain, and South America. The Polish government's investigation, launched immediately after the March 2025 discovery, brought together historians, forensic specialists, intelligence analysts, and archivists from multiple nations. The Warsaw bunker became a protected archaeological site with restricted access. Full excavation began in April 2025. The bunker's layout matched Wehrmacht construction standards. 3 main chambers connected by tunnels, reinforced concrete construction, electrical systems powered by a generator, and ventilation shafts concealed above ground. The facility could shelter 15 to 20 people for extended periods. Chamber 1 served as living quarters. Investigators found bunk beds, a small kitchen area, and personal items, Wehrmacht uniforms, civilian clothing, shaving equipment, books, and religious items. Carbon dating of organic materials confirmed usage between 1944 and 1946, with peak activity in mid-1945. Chamber 2 was the command center where von Steinberg's satchel was found. The room contained desks, filing cabinets, a radio transmitter, non-functional by 2025 but identifiable as German military equipment, maps of Central Europe, and most importantly, documents. The filing cabinets held 47 identity documents, forged papers for escaping German personnel. Each included a photograph, false name, occupation, and travel authorization. Cross-referencing these photos with wartime Wehrmacht records identified 19 individuals, 12 Wehrmacht officers, 4 SS officers, and 3 civilian officials from Nazi administrative departments. All were officially listed as killed in action or missing, presumed dead. The documents showed sophisticated forgery work, paper aging, authentic-looking stamps, signatures that mimicked Soviet and Polish administrative officials, and where patterns suggesting the documents had been prepared weeks or months before use. This indicated organized operations, not improvised escapes. One document set belonged to Johann Richter, supposedly a Czech engineer. The photograph showed Generalmajor Ernst Kessler, commander of the 216th Infantry Division, officially killed at Königsberg in April 1945. But the Richter documents were dated May 1945, issued in Warsaw, suggesting Kessler survived Königsberg and used von Steinberg's escape route. The radio transmitter discovery raised disturbing questions. If the bunker had functioning radio equipment in 1945, escaping officers could coordinate movements, receive intelligence about Allied patrol patterns, and communicate with other escape network nodes. This suggested the escape route wasn't just a series of safe houses, but a coordinated intelligence operation. Chamber 3 contained supplies, canned food with German military markings, medical supplies, ammunition, and currency. Investigators found German Reichsmarks, Polish zloty, Soviet rubles, and Swiss francs. The currency mix indicated the escape route spanned multiple jurisdictions and required bribes at each stage. Most significantly, Chamber 3 contained a metal strongbox buried under floor stones. The box, sealed with wax and hidden deliberately, contained gold. 47 gold bars, each stamped with German Reichsbank markings, total weight approximately 15 kilograms, value in 1945 roughly $25,000, equivalent to over $400,000 today. This was operational funding for the escape network. The tunnel leading from the bunker toward the Vistula River extended 400 feet underground before collapsing 80 feet from the riverbank. Engineering analysis suggested it was designed as an emergency escape route if the bunker was discovered. Escaping personnel could flee through the tunnel, emerge near the river, and disappear into Warsaw's ruins. Forensic document analysis of von Steinberg's papers confirmed their authenticity. The identity documents matched his official Wehrmacht photographs. Handwriting comparison with his military reports, held in German Federal Archives, showed consistent letter formations and signature characteristics. The escape route map became the investigation's centerpiece. Each waypoint marked on the map corresponded to locations researchers could identify. Warsaw to Krakow. Waypoint 1, Radom Industrial District. Waypoint 2, Kielce agricultural area. Waypoint 3, Mycho small town. Waypoint 4, Krakow outskirts. Krakow to Vienna. Waypoint 1, Zakopane mountain region. Waypoint 2, Slovakia border crossing. Waypoint 3, Bratislava. Waypoint 4, Austrian border. Waypoint 5, Vienna suburbs. Waypoint 6, Vienna proper. Vienna to Switzerland. Waypoint 1, Salzburg. Waypoint 2, Innsbruck. Waypoint 3, Swiss border. Investigators contacted authorities in each location, requesting searches for evidence of 1945-era safe houses or unusual activity. Results were mixed, but several locations yielded discoveries. In Krakow, city archives contained a 1946 police report about a suspected black market operation in the district, corresponding to von Steinberg's map. The report mentioned German transients seen in the area, but investigations were dropped due to lack of evidence. In Zakopane, a mountain town near the Slovak border, researchers found property records showing a farmhouse purchased in 1944 by a German businessman who disappeared in 1945. The property remained abandoned until the 1950s. When investigators examined the site in May 2025, they found a hidden cellar containing German military equipment and forged documents similar to those in Warsaw. In Vienna, Austrian intelligence files from 1940-519 for 6 contained reports of an escape network moving German officers through the city toward Switzerland. The files mentioned a logistics officer organizing movements, but no names were given. The description matched von Steinberg's background. The Swiss connection proved most difficult to trace. Switzerland accepted thousands of refugees in 1945, and banking secrecy laws protected identities. But researchers found something unexpected. In 2009, a Swiss bank disclosed dormant accounts belonging to Holocaust victims. Among the accounts was one opened in August 1945 by Friedrich Werner, listing occupation as logistics consultant. The account received deposits from multiple sources between 1945 and 1960, then remained untouched until Swiss authorities froze it in 2009. Forensic investigators comparing the Friedrich Werner signature on banking documents with von Steinberg's wartime signatures found similarities, but not conclusive proof. Werner could have been von Steinberg's alias or coincidentally similar handwriting. Without additional evidence, the connection remained speculative. DNA analysis provided partial answers. In the Warsaw bunker, investigators found hair samples in a sleeping area. DNA extracted from these samples was compared to databases containing genetic information from von Steinberg's known descendants. His daughter Margaret had died in 2001, but her children, von Steinberg's grandchildren, provided reference DNA samples. The results showed a familial match probability of 87%, strongly suggesting the hair belonged to von Steinberg or a close relative. This confirmed he'd used the Warsaw bunker personally, not just established it for others. The investigation also uncovered communication between von Steinberg and his daughter. Beyond the 1945 letter, researchers found 3 additional letters in Margaret's estate, dated 1947, 1952, and 1958. All were postmarked from different Swiss cities, unsigned, but in von Steinberg's handwriting. The 1947 letter read, "Winter has been mild. My work continues quietly. I think of you often and hope life treats you well. The past cannot be changed, but the present can be lived with dignity." The 1952 letter mentioned, "My health remains good despite advancing years. I've found peace in this quiet life, far from old storms. Remember me as I was before the madness, not what I became during it." The 1958 letter, the last, stated, "I grow old and tired. Perhaps soon I'll rest permanently. Know that I loved you and your brothers always, even when duty took me far from family. Forgive what you can forgive. Forget what you must forget. No further letters existed. Margaret told relatives before her death that she believed her father died sometime in the late 1950s or early 1960s, but she never learned where or how. Investigators attempted to trace Friedrich Werner's movements after 1960. Swiss records showed the Werner identity disappeared after 1962. No death certificate, no property transfers, no tax filings. Either Werner died without official documentation, or he assumed another identity for his final years. One tantalizing clue emerged in 2025. A retirement home in Lucerne, Switzerland, closed in 2010, had stored personal effects from deceased residents. Among these items discovered during estate clearance was a box labeled F. Werner, deceased 1964, no known relatives. The box contained books, clothing, and a photograph album. The photographs showed an elderly man, alone, in various Swiss locations during the 1950s-60s. Facial recognition analysis comparing these photos to von Steinberg's wartime images yielded an 81% match probability, considering age progression. The man in the photographs could plausibly be von Steinberg in his 60s-70s. If Friedrich Werner was von Steinberg, he lived in Switzerland from 1945 until his death in 1964, age 71, under a false identity, never facing justice for his role in the Wehrmacht, never prosecuted for war crimes, never held accountable for serving the Nazi regime. That raises the critical question: did von Steinberg commit war crimes? His military record shows he commanded units on the Eastern Front, where Wehrmacht committed systematic atrocities against Soviet civilians and prisoners. But specific evidence linking von Steinberg personally to war crimes doesn't exist in available archives. His 347th Infantry Division operated in areas where massacres occurred, but so did hundreds of Wehrmacht units. Without direct evidence, his case falls into the gray zone where thousands of German officers existed, participants in a criminal regime's war effort, but not individually prosecuted for specific atrocities. However, the Warsaw bunker evidence proves von Steinberg facilitated escapes for other officers, including SS personnel. 4 of the 47 identity documents found belonged to SS officers. If von Steinberg knowingly helped SS escape, particularly those involved in Holocaust operations, he bore moral responsibility for enabling their escapes. One document belonged to SS Sturmbannführer Heinrich Schröder, assigned to Einsatzgruppe operations in Poland. These units conducted mass executions of Jews, partisans, and civilians. Schröder was listed as missing, presumed dead in 1945. If he used von Steinberg's escape route, he potentially fled justice for mass murder. Investigators tracked Schröder's fate using the forged identity provided in Warsaw. Karl Schmidt, supposedly a German factory worker, appears in Argentine immigration records from September 1945. If Schmidt was Schröder, the SS officer escaped to South America, lived freely, and died unpunished. This pattern repeated with multiple individuals whose documents passed through Warsaw. At least 7 of the 19 identified personnel had backgrounds suggesting potential war crimes involvement. Von Steinberg's escape network served not just ordinary soldiers fleeing harsh Soviet treatment, but potentially enabled war criminals to escape justice. The investigation also revealed connections between von Steinberg's escape route and other known networks. The most famous was the Ratlin operations run by Catholic clergy and fascist sympathizers, moving Nazis through Italy to South America. While von Steinberg's route ran through Eastern Europe, evidence suggests coordination between networks. A letter found in the Warsaw bunker, dated June 1945, written in coded German, referenced Southern connections and reliable friends in Rome. Intelligence analysts believe this indicated von Steinberg's network connected to Italian escape routes at some point, possibly in Vienna or Switzerland, allowing escaping Germans to choose between staying in Europe or continuing to South America. The full scope of von Steinberg's escape network may never be known. The Warsaw bunker was one way station among many. How many others exist undiscovered? How many German officers used the route? How many were ordinary soldiers seeking survival versus war criminals fleeing justice? What is certain? Generalleutnant Friedrich Wilhelm von Steinberg, officially killed in Berlin in April 1945, actually escaped through a sophisticated network he'd planned for months, lived in Switzerland under a false identity for at least 19 years, died peacefully in 1964, and was never held accountable for his service to the Nazi regime or his role in helping others escape justice. For those who suffered under Nazi occupation, cases like von Steinberg's represent painful injustice. He commanded troops in a war of aggression and genocide. Whether or not he personally committed atrocities, he served the regime that did. He should have faced Allied courts, been judged for his actions, and accepted consequences. Instead, he built an escape route, disappeared into Swiss anonymity, and lived out his years in comfortable retirement, while millions of victims had no such escape, no comfortable retirement, no justice. The Warsaw bunker discovery reopened debates about World War II justice. How many other Nazi officials, military officers, and war criminals escaped similar routes? How many lived unpunished in South America, the Middle East, or even back in post-war Germany under false identities? Historians estimate at least 9,000 Nazi personnel escaped prosecution through various networks between 1945 and 1950. Some were caught decades later, like Adolf Eichmann captured in Argentina in 1960. Most were never found. They died peacefully, their true identities unknown, their crimes forgotten. Von Steinberg's escape route, revealed 80 years later, adds one more chapter to this dark history. The Polish government announced plans to create a memorial at the Warsaw bunker site, honoring those who suffered under Nazi occupation and reminding future generations that some perpetrators escaped justice. The bunker itself, sealed and preserved, stands as evidence of how carefully some planned their escapes, how elaborate the networks were, and how many gaps existed in Allied efforts to capture fleeing Nazis. Friedrich Wilhelm von Steinberg demonstrated intelligence, planning, and survival instinct. He used skills developed serving the Wehrmacht to save himself and others. From one perspective, that's admirable resourcefulness. From another, it's a war criminal enabling other criminals to escape justice. The truth probably lies in between. Von Steinberg was a career soldier who served a monstrous regime, recognized its impending collapse, prioritized personal survival over facing consequences, and successfully disappeared into history until construction workers in Warsaw, 80 years later, broke through concrete and found the bunker that kept his secrets for nearly a century. The leather satchel containing his identity documents, left behind in Warsaw, suggests he wanted someone eventually to know the truth. Whether from pride, sentiment, or guilt, he preserved evidence of his real identity even while assuming false ones. Perhaps he hoped someday history would judge him not as a war criminal, but as a survivor navigating impossible circumstances. History's judgment remains harsh. He served a criminal regime. He enabled others to escape justice. He lived freely while millions died. Whether his individual conduct warranted prosecution, the network he built certainly helped those who deserved it escape accountability. The Warsaw bunker stands today behind construction fencing, awaiting conversion into a historical site. The tunnel extending toward the Vistula remains collapsed, too dangerous for public access. But the command center where von Steinberg left his satchel has been preserved exactly as found, a time capsule from 1945 when Berlin fell, and some decided not to face the consequences. Friedrich von Steinberg built something extraordinary through careful planning and exploitation of chaos. Whether that deserves respect or condemnation depends on perspective. What's certain? He succeeded in escaping Berlin, surviving Soviet occupation, reaching Switzerland, and living 19 years under a false identity before dying peacefully at age 71. Sometimes the earth keeps secrets for 80 years, and sometimes construction workers drill deep enough to uncover what was meant to stay hidden. The red ink map showing waypoints across Eastern Europe remains in Polish archives, a testament to one general's refusal to accept the fate most of his colleagues faced: death in battle, Soviet captivity, or Allied prosecution. He chose a fourth path: disappearance, and he succeeded for 8 decades. The only question remaining: how many others succeeded similarly, and how many secrets still lie buried beneath European soil, waiting for the next construction crew to drill deep enough to expose them?